Travels of the Ellis Arbor is a TTRPG story set in the world of Bastion using the Vagrant Sun campaign setting. Tune in for episode 46, Kiéth. Having been granted entrance through the gates of Can, Darian, Carpathian, and Edward began their walk through its murky streets. Freedmen, an acolyte of Pleiades, and their guide, kept their pace quickened as they navigated the sideways glances and foul disposition of the cairn's inhabitants. Despite its garish walls, the streets of the cairn matched that of a quaint seaside village. Wood rot and dilapidated iron were the colours of each building. Smoke plumes of small wood fires burned in hearths, but nothing could seem to shake the cold or the frost. In fact, it felt more as if the coarse wind blew rust and smoke every which way. It was less a quaintness and more an underbelly of forgotten, undernourished industry. Crossroads met where small caravans of traders bartered. Few were interested in cloth, food, or supplies. Most seemed to be selling whatever treasure they had on hand. A few gold pieces, hushed conversations, and swapping of folded notes. It didn't take an insightful character to realize that the primary export of Can was information. As they looked on, the crew spotted more and more of their fair share of unsavory characters. Hooded vagrants sitting idly as they played with the hilts of their weapons. Gangs of thugs and urchins precariously waiting outside of buildings, preying upon the unsuspecting. But despite the feeling of danger around every corner, there was less violence than one would have anticipated. Freedmen spoke up, as if surprised the crew hadn't already inquired as to the nature of the cairn.
Do you feel it? The tension? The lack of violence must seem strange to you, yes?
Darian chuckled underneath his breath.
It does seem curious. Even after an hour in our last township, we'd already been assaulted by figures such as these. And they had a full platoon of guards at their back. Indeed, violence is discouraged under pain of, pain. There are numerous factions that dwell within Can, all of them at odds. But in order to keep things running without the inevitable bloodbath, we're fortunate enough to have the Silver Host managing the vermin.
Carpathian turned to answer, as if attempting to sway their guide with his superior understanding.
I've heard of this. Powerful accursed warriors, if I'm not mistaken. It's reported that they practice blood magic and hemocraft. Lycans, the lot of them. You wouldn't let werewolves and demons run a place such as this.
Freedman turned to face the wizard.
And why not? Who would stop them? Each and every denizen of Can makes up a part of a whole. The Silver Host have need of a place to live. The rest of these inhabitants need a place to work. That is how things are in Can. It's how they've been for decades.
At this, Edward spoke up. Do you mean that there are werewolves stalking these streets? Surely that means these people are in danger. Aren't we in danger too?
Well, you would be, were it not for another faction. Myself and the other priests of the Order of Pleiades see to that. You see, the light of the vagrant moon is what turns the Lycans into beasts. But if you'll notice...
Freedman trailed off and pointed his hand toward the southwestern edge of the Cobalite Sierras. As he did, the crew noticed a strange image. Fully obscured behind the peak of the mountain ranges, a vague silhouette of the Vagrant Sun could be seen. They imagined that, as day turned to night, the light would be fully obscured. Wait, the sun and moon are hidden. Then why aren't we in complete shadow? Friedman smiled, doffing his hood and shaking his hair free from beneath.
Precisely. The Silver Host are able to maintain their forms without fear of turning mad, because the light of the vagrant moon cannot shine here. One of the strangest phenomenons in Bastion.
He turned his head to the east, pointing this time past the Sierras and toward the eastern bay. Just beyond, the faintest glimmer of light, incandescent and burning, like a lighthouse or a far-off star.
That is our light. The light of Pleiades. A brilliant cathedral whose peak shines endlessly. That is the light under which we now bathe. During the day, its vibrant orange hue burns, and at night, the soft blue glimmer accompanies our rest.
Darian spoke in response.
So the light of Pleiades doesn't affect the Silver Host? Let me guess. You're here to ensure they're guided onto that light.
Again, Friedman turned and smiled.
Something like that. Come, we should get you in and out of the cold.
And following behind, the crew began to realize just how filthy they'd become over the course of their night's adventure. Darian still clutching at his coat, and Carpathian still drying the pages of his many tomes. They were well overdue for some comfortable surrounds. Heading northeast along a cobblestone road, the chapel came into view. Less an omnipotent place of worship, and more a cobbling of wooden buildings and religious iconography. The golden symbol of Pleiades, a star with which they were familiar, donned the front entrance. Its great double doors were askew, being held together by a long silver rope. As Friedman approached, he unknotted the thick cord, letting the doors swing freely and encouraging the crew to head inside. An all too familiar sight. Rows of cobbled together snow-damp pews, rows of rough stonework columns, a myriad of tapestries and cases of books donning every wall. And though the iconography reminded them of their first encounter with the Pleiades chapel, they were struck by the similarity of the abbey in which they encountered the sea witch, Adeline. Turning each to an open pew, Friedman doffed his regalia, pulling a simple leather jerkin around his shoulders, and addressed the crew.
So, you've come for information, correct? How can I and the chapel be of assistance?
Darian began to explain their predicament. He spoke on their venture across Far Reach, amidst the many dangers that dotted their path to Denea's Mere. He spoke on their encounter with Chester's marvelous band, and the crude weave that Nout had wound himself up in. As the purpose of the conversation began to stray, Friedman's gaze locked onto the captain as he mentioned Nout.
Ah, Nout is your companion. Ah, yes. I understand now.
And at that, the crew began to surge with curiosity.
Come to think of it, he did mention that he might be followed here. Do you know of his whereabouts? I'd suggest you tell us. Now, don't be hasty. I'm not about to hide him from you, though I imagine he is as out of your reach as he is ours.
Dejected, Edward spoke up at this phrase. Out of reach? Gods, what mad plot has he wound himself up in this time? As Edward stood in frustration, it was then that Darian noticed Friedman's eyes had barely glanced anywhere other than him. It was as if the acolyte was assessing, calculating, taking a measure of the captain and his character.
You're the one he's trying to set free, aren't you? We left Nout on bad terms. Not purposefully, but under strenuous circumstances. We hope to reconvene with him, if you will point us in the right...
Friedman loudly interjected.
Kiéth. That is where you'll find him. For that is where Nout has absconded.
Kiéth? What is that?
Friedman began to describe. At the heart of Midas Cairn lay a pit, a dungeon lost to the winds of time. Now, a veil is worn over the entrance to the dungeon, creating a portal to the blackness beyond. There, sleeping within malice and torment, lay creatures most foul. Demons. Midas Cairn, as it appeared, had a multitude of secrets of its own.
Kiéth is home to all manner of evil monstrosity. Nout wished to prepare the components of a severance ritual, one that can shed a being of their divine, occult, or otherwise otherworldly patronage. In order to do that, you need otherworldly essence. Feathers from an angel's wing, the horns of a Baelor's crown, or the blood of a demon would do.
A wave of realization flooded over the crew. Are you saying that Nout has gone to Kiéth, a pit filled with monstrosities, to gather the blood of a demon? Is he still there? Friedman retorted in a matter-of-fact response.
It's been days, but one doesn't venture into the pit of demons without a good and righteous reason, do they not?
Travels of the Ellis Arbor is made possible by the generous support of our subscribers, followers, and most notably, our patrons. Special thanks to new and existing patrons for our Moon, Wedge, Crown, and Hex tier subscriptions. Please subscribe, give a like or a comment, follow us on Twitter, and stay tuned for the next episode. Make sure you follow us here on YouTube, on Spotify, and on twitch.tv/lonomy. Don't forget, take care of each other.